everyone. Welcome back to the Pace Podcast. My name is Sophie, and I'm here with Chase Hogue.
Hello.
He's my boss, so I have to behave well on this podcast. Today we're talking about something that it was highly requested.
Okay.
And it was actually highly requested that you talk about it.
Oh,
So
okay.
You're welcome. A little ego boost for
All
you.
right. I'm boosted.
We're talking about deconstructing. I'm boosted. We're talking about deconstructing your faith and kind of the difference between wrestling with the church but not letting it impact your relationship with Jesus and who he is. Because something that I'm learning about deconstruction is that questioning your faith does not have to mean you have to abandon it. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are in that middle of like, I'm questioning, does that mean I don't believe in Jesus anymore? And I would say that that's not true. Mm-hmm. And so today we're just going to have like a really honest conversation, what it actually looks like to deconstruct. You've had a season where you have done this. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's just like an honest conversation. Are you ready to be honest?
I'll do my best.
Can you be honest?
I can be honest.
Okay, so what do you think people mean when they say I'm deconstructing my faith? Because it is kind of a thing right now. So what do they mean when they say that?
Well, I mean, I think of it as like being the opposite of constructing something, right?
Ooh,
so
when
we're constructing something, we're building something. Mm-hmm. When we're deconstructing something, we're taking it apart.
Yeah.
That process can be like really precise, really technical, or it could be kind of like how we ripped down a wall a few weeks ago here at church, where we just like took a sledgehammer to it.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was fun. And so I think of it as like this process of just like picking things apart a little bit, taking things apart. I'm trying to think of like, I guess we're probably going to get more into like why people do this, what the end goal of it is. But really, I think it's just this process of people picking apart their faith and deconstructing what they have built up over their life, I suppose. Yeah.
What do you hear are the most common reasons for people deconstructing their faith?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way I like often, sorry, I might go back a little bit here too, into that last question as I process these as they come through. So when I think about like what we construct, like your job as a children's pastor is to help kids construct faith. You're helping them to build healthy frameworks. Sometimes we get unhealthy frameworks, right? Yeah. And those unhealthy frameworks need to be deconstructed. And so I think that the reason I hear people kind of enter into this like a season of deconstruction is because they've had some sort of encounter that breaks their framework. Whether the framework is good or whether it's unhealthy, it's just some sort of encounter that makes them question the tools, the resources, the structure they've been given.
Taught,
And so like that can look like a death, and questioning like, well, why did this happen? It can look like just meeting someone of a different like faith background or a different just way of being that makes your view of how God operates more expansive, And so it can be something that's really, really like hard and challenging, or it can be something that's really like
new,
enlightening and new. Okay. Yeah. So,
I think, I don't know if you would agree with this, but well, maybe this isn't the case then after what you said, but like, is the core of deconstruction usually some sort of grief, whether it's like big grief or just small little, like, I don't know, is that the core feeling that people are feeling when they're deconstructing?
I think so it's really hard because I think, yes, I think there is grief involved, but I also think deconstruction can feel a lot like liberation for people.
Oh, interesting.
Like it can feel like them like shaking the dust off or like, removing a burden, right? Yeah. Now, all that to say, it's a process. And I think that even if your initial experience of deconstruction is that of like freedom, grief will follow at some point in time. so I don't know if I would say it's like core to it, but I think it is a part of the process, because often deconstruction involves a loss of identity. Like as you're removing like bits of these old frameworks that you've been given, you know, like maybe those frameworks were given to you by Pastor Sophie, who you loved, you know, as a child. Like, and
that's a really good point,
because
it might have been a human that you loved and trusted,
or your parents, you know.
That's a really good point, that there might be some grief just coming with like where you learned these things. You know, like they weren't inherently bad people. They were just teaching you what they thought you should have been taught.
Right.
So it's kind of like there has to be a lot of grace too when you're deconstructing for the people in your life that maybe like caused that, or does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a loss of like not loss of truth, but you're like renegotiating with truth and like what you thought was real. Like, I mean, I know we'll talk more about my experience, but like this was maybe even pre like me deconstructing my faith. I remember like the first time I met someone, or actually I was dating this person and found out like they weren't a Christian, and I was like, you can do that? Like, I didn't know you could be not a Christian, because I grew up like my mom worked for the church, and so it was like everybody I surrounded myself with, they were Christians, and so it made me renegotiate with reality, and that's scary, you know, that's unknown, and so I think that's maybe that's not grief, but that's like fear, and so I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do want you to share more about your time in your life where you I know on the podcast with Alex you talked a little bit about this time in your life, but I want you to share a little bit about the time in your life where you deconstructed your faith, and like what was the moment for you that made you want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know if
so
people
it's not
do.
always a choice to deconstruct.
I think it's never a choice.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's always I think it's something that happens to you.
Got it.
And in fact, I'm reading a book right now by this guy named Bradley Jersak, and he says exactly that. It's like this is something that like happens to you. And in fact, he shared like this political cartoon, or not political because it's not political, it's a faith cartoon.
Cartoons.
Of this guy in a boat, and he's fishing in the ocean, and he's fishing for the truth, and like when you're doing that, like you're expecting to catch these like little fish and stuff, but beneath the surface there's this giant shark. And that's how he's using it to describe like what deconstruction is like, because we're all just like hunting for the truth. We're just fishing for the truth or whatever. We want to know what's real. But sometimes with this like process of deconstruction, it can like a shark grabbing onto your line, pulling you into the water, like pulling you into the deep end. It can be kind of like that. So what was the question?
Like that was good. Share about your time of deconstructing. Like maybe what was the catalyst to that happening to you?
Yes. Yeah. And I said, and I didn't necessarily want it.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So I don't know if there's one like clear catalyst. I think there are a few moments that I identify as like the beginnings of the process. And it took years for me. But part of my faith story is that I grew up in the church. My mom worked in the church. I was surrounded by church people. It was very very formative for me growing up in that space. But I would say that like I didn't take ownership of my faith or commit myself to Jesus until I was in high school, and really around the time that I started dating my wife.
Shout out to Caroline.
Shout out to Caroline.
She's the best.
She is. And so like that was probably senior year of high school, and then we went off to college. I started attending this new church, and that church really became where I started to really, really build kind of like my faith frameworks in a more like significant way. And that church, there was a lot of really great things about it. But the foundation that it was being built on was a foundation of kind of like spiritual pride and arrogance, at least in me.
Yeah. And
so I held that faith that I was carrying with a lot of like contempt for other people, and with a lot of like, there's a lot of like need for like certainty as well. Like I wanted to know what was true. Yeah. And I had a pastor who would tell me what was true. Like Caroline and I would always joke, like this guy, he presented every sermon as like a debate almost. So he had like, you know, a question that was being asked, and then he had like an argument that he was making to present his point. And so it was like I would always leave with like the information I wanted.
Interesting.
And so it was really, really helpful, especially in like this season of me like building things up. Well, we graduated, ended up moving back to our hometown, going to the church that Caroline grew up at, and that I eventually worked at for a number of years.
Yeah.
And I remember the pastor, Pastor Bill, being up in front, and I don't remember what he was preaching on. I don't recall like the exact context of what he was saying. I just remember him presenting some sort of like rhetorical question to the congregation. And I'm sitting there with my, like a good, you know, Christian dude with my journal and my Bible, and I'm ready to write down the answer. Right? I'm ready to write down the answer to this question because that's what I was there for. I was there for answers. I want to know. And he sits there silently for like 5 seconds and then shrugs his shoulders and he says, I don't know.
And you're like, you're supposed to know.
Pissed me off. I was like, that's your job. Like, you are supposed to know these answers. And I remember that shook me. Like, why doesn't he know? You know, this dude has been a pastor for 30 years. He's got all the wisdom in the world. And yet, like, he can't even answer this, like, question for me. So that was a big, big piece of it. Then, like, the kind of the next catalyst would be when Caroline and I moved to Oregon, and we worked at a Young Life camp, and that just exposed us to like people who loved Jesus. I always say they loved Jesus more than me. You know, just their faith was like so strong and beautiful, and yet like we just didn't agree on like certain things from scripture, and it just confused me, you know. And I remember one of my best friends, he was a missionary in Turkey at the time, and we were pen pals. We'd write letters back and forth to each other.
I had a pen pal in, I think, 2nd grade, and she was from France. And she sent me an Eiffel Tower keychain. So
that's amazing.
Beat that.
But I remember in one of my letters to him, like I asked him, like, I was like, why is it that God allows these different interpretations of his word? If there's one like truth, then why is it that like Jake can come up with a completely different like answer to these questions than me? And like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And yet, you know, I looked at these people and I was like, you're better than me though. You know, like, I don't agree with you. And so a lot of that pride and contempt that I had like hidden in my heart started to kind of like melt away during that season. And I started to ask more questions. And I remember this guy, Jake, we were talking about Rob Bell actually one day. And I had always been told to avoid him. Like, don't, like, Rob Bell, this was after his Love Wins era. And like, the pastor I was under in college was like, yeah, he's a false teacher. And I remember talking to Jake about it, and Jake loved Rob Bell. And I was like, well, then are you really a Christian?
Yeah.
Like, which is, it's like, I feel like some shame in saying,
well, hindsight is 20/20.
Process, right? But I remember him being like, well, have you ever read any of Rob Bell's books? And I was just like, no, I haven't.
You just took what was told to you.
Exactly. And so he was like, well, you should read like this book.
It's like the process of forming what you believe about things. Because I think you probably hear me say this all the time, that I'm like, I don't know what I believe about anything. Like, I don't know how to make a choice. I don't know what I believe about things. I'm like, whatever you say, I'll just go with, you know. But like, you get to this point in your young adulthood where you do need to find out for yourself. Yeah.
So, process of discovery, right? And so, I I always say, like, you need to have good guides, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to have people who can lead you on the journey. But yeah, you also have to do the work,
Yeah.
you know, and I wasn't doing the work. I was just like
someone else's faith.
letting other people tell me what
Mm-hmm.
to think. And so that was very like, what's like exposing. Like I felt very like, vulnerable.
Because at this point you were in your early 20s.
Yeah, I was probably 24, 25 at that point in time.
So young.
So young. So young. And so like that, these are like cracks forming, I would say. Like that's how I always think about it. And then I ended up going and working at this church I worked at an Anglican church, and then I worked at the church my Caroline grew up at. Mm-hmm. And it was there when things started to really fall apart, you know.
So you were actively working in ministry.
Yes, yeah. And so like I continued to have these big questions. I remember going like to my interview for this church that Caroline grew up at, and really feeling like I was like hiding bits and pieces of myself because I had all these like big questions, but I didn't feel safe to share them, you know, because I really wanted the job.
Yeah. That's
and you know, and like I thought, like, who better than these people to like walk me through this process, right?
That's a good point.
You know, there are people who like you know, the youth pastor I worked with there was Caroline's youth pastor. Like,
so you're like, there's a lot of wisdom.
Yes, yeah. And I was really excited about the prospect of getting to like see my faith like kind of rebuilt in that context.
Yeah.
But the reality became that that's where my faith like fell apart.
Yeah.
So that
You're
was like
that's not what I asked for.
Their fault.
Yeah.
You know, it was circumstantial. Like COVID, you know, doing ministry in the midst of COVID was really like intense and hard. And then like, you know, as I shared in the last podcast, that's when my dad died. Yeah. And that's when really like, you know, I would say like when my dad died, that like if you're imagining my faith as like a piece of glass, you know, it wasn't like crumbled to dust at that point, but like it's about to, right? Yeah. You know, that's where I'm at after he passes away. I feel like a shell of my former self. I don't feel like I can trust God at that point. And I just like all the questions are swirling. Yeah. But I'm continuing to kind of just like keep it together because I'm ministering to like 12 and 13-year-old boys and girls.
It's a really real thing when you're grieving something about God, but then you have to show up to your job and teach kids that like he's good. And you're like, I don't know if I believe that.
Yes.
So like let's put on the show today, you know?
Exactly. And that's what it felt like. I felt like I was just like doing the song and dance, putting on the show. And then like when I'd say everything fell apart for me, it was about a year after my dad had passed. I had been like keeping my composure, you know, and I remember I went out to coffee with this group of guys I would go to coffee and donuts with every week. And you know, just like an accountability / Bible study group. And they asked me, they're like, hey, how are you doing? And I was like, actually, I'm like fine. You know, I'm sitting there like telling them like, yeah, I'm good. You know, like I feel like I've kind of moved on, you know, this like 6 months after my dad has died. So I'm in like a total, you know, disillusionment about how I really am. And then I went home to get my stuff before heading into the church, and Winnie fell off the couch and hit her head, which is like, you know, she was at the time, she was like 1.5, I think. You know, something a toddler would do. But for some reason, she hit her head so hard, she got knocked out cold, ended up having a seizure in my arms, and like basically stopped breathing. And so we're like rushing her to the hospital as she's like turning blue, and I'm like sitting there just like weeping with her in my arms. And like I can talk about it in kind of a comical way now because she's fine. And
she's amazing. Yeah.
She's an incredible human, and she's here. And I always joke that I'm like, this should have scared her more, but it didn't. She still does like things that scare the crap out of me. Yeah. But you know, I rush into the hospital like it's a scene out of like ER or whatever the contemporary hospital show is right now. I don't know
He doesn't even watch TV, so.
Oh, I watch TV. And I'm just like, my baby, you know, like somebody help me. And I get her in there, they put her on oxygen, she starts breathing, you know, and then we spend like the next 36 hours like in the hospital. You know, we ended up having to move her over to the Children's Hospital in Kansas City. But all this time, I am just crying. Like, yeah. I cannot stop crying. Mm-hmm. You know, even after she came to, like, I cried all day. Mm-hmm. And all night. Like, Caroline and I were up all night that night because she was starting to come to and stuff. She had like a really, really bad concussion. But I remember that night being in the hospital, like that's when the glass just shattered and everything fell to the floor. And I remember telling Caroline, I was like, I will never be the same person again after tonight. Like, because I think all of the weight that I had been carrying with just like the questions about my faith, about like the loss of my dad, the grief that I was holding and all of that. And then like this incident, like, you know, I just felt like I didn't have anyone. There was I felt alone. I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. Like, you know, I didn't have like this father figure in my life anymore. Like my grandfathers had passed, my dad. And so I was just like, it's me. Like, and then I didn't feel like I could trust God. Like, and so I just felt like this intense like weight and pressure at the time. And that was like the low point, you know?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Now, praise God, like Winnie is fine. Yeah. And you know, like
she's a future kids pastor.
She's probably future kids pastor. But that like, you know, there's nothing like, I don't know, I could talk more about like how like my theological frameworks broke in the midst of all of that and like the questions that I was asking, but I don't think that's the point, you know? Mm-hmm. And even today, as I was like thinking about like the deconstruction process, I have like this stack of books that kind of helped me like through the process. But so many of them aren't necessarily about like what even is deconstruction. They're just the things that I specifically was wrestling with that helped me to like start to rebuild my faith in a new way. Yeah. So it's like the theological frameworks and questions are almost beside the point in my mind. It was the experience of losing like my faith in the midst of all of the circumstances of life, you know, and then having to put on the show, you know, and pretend like I was okay. Because even after that, like, you know, I went back to work at the church.
It's your job.
Just keep doing the thing. And I'm trying to think, that would have been in 2019. So then we like went into COVID and it was just like,
you're like, here we go again,
a hot mess. You know? Yeah. And so then it's just after that, it was just like bouts of depression and anxiety and like just not knowing like how to like how to pull everything back together. And you know, it's like 7 years since that happened, when he's turning 8 this week.
Yes. So fun.
And I'm like still feeling like I'm definitely like still piecing things back together.
Yeah. So. I think that is the part that resonates with me a lot, is I thought that like, because I feel like when you start following Jesus, people forget to tell you about the parts where you start to doubt him. It's like, oh, like, it's amazing that you accepted Jesus, and it is, but then sometimes we forget to tell them that, like, it's gonna get hard soon. Yeah. And so that is kind of what happened to me, and then I went through the things that have been really hard, and then it's like, you question and you doubt him and you wonder if it's worth it, and then it makes you feel like you're bad for doing that, and so that you just should abandon him altogether, because you must be bad if you don't believe all these things, you know, like you must be wrong, so you just can't follow him because you're wrong and you don't get it, you know. And that's kind of where I've landed. And it's weird to come to a job where you feel like you're supposed to be the one that's so confident, but actually, like, every single day I'm still doubting. But what I've learned is that actually makes me more authentic as like a pastor or like somebody who disciples kids. Like, it makes me actually more authentic in that, not less trustworthy.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. And I think it's important too for, you know, for us, like as people who are walking alongside folks in this journey of faith, to to like live authentically and but also to remind people that like, I mean, I think that's why having this kind of a conversation is so important, that this is something that happens to everyone. Like I genuinely believe it happens to everyone in some capacity. And that there is a long tradition within the church of people navigating these doubts and these questions. And, you know, like Richard Rohr, one of my favorite like authors, he has this like he has this framework of how this happens. Like we go from order to disorder to reorder, or, you know, orientation to disorientation to reorientation. You know, it's like people are naming this, you know, and not just like in our current like blip of history, but all throughout the church. And even today, as I was like thinking about it, like I believe like scripture preserves like people's like experience of this. Like as I was jotting down some notes, I thought of the story of Jonah. Like I think Jonah's story is a story of like deconstruction, because like God comes to Jonah and says, "Hey, I want you to go preach to the Ninevites." And Jonah's like, "No, I don't want to," you know, because the Ninevites are bad, you know, and so God comes to Jonah and presents himself as something other than what Jonah thought God was. And so Jonah runs away, you know, because he's like, that's, you know, and so then the whole story becomes this process of like Jonah coming to terms with who this God is, this God of compassion and mercy, right? Even to these people who are, in his mind, too far gone. Right? But it's like your grace extends even to them. But the story ends with Jonah still. Like it's you're left with this question of just like, is Jonah actually like accepting of this new reality? You know, because he goes to Nineveh and he's like, he's pissed about it. He's like, I don't want to be here. He does what he's supposed to do. He checks the box. But then he ends up like just complaining more, and because he's mad that God is willing to extend mercy to these people.
So maybe like at the core of deconstructing, it's just finding out that maybe God isn't exactly who you thought he was.
Yeah, I think like again, it's like we have these constructs, and the reality is that God is bigger than all of our constructs. And so that's why I think this happens to everyone. Is because we have an encounter that reveals to us like the bigness of God, and how like these things that we've been given like can't confine him. Now, the reality is we need the structures. We need the frameworks. Like your job is really important, you know, and doing your job well is really important.
Am I? No, I'm kidding. Staff review.
Safe, known, and loved. Like those are three really important frameworks for our kids to know, is that they are safe, known, and loved. And so like building those frameworks is important. Having those structures in place is important, but building them in a way knowing that they're probably going to like crumble at some point is important. It's kind of like how in Japan, you know, they build their skyscrapers in a certain way to withstand earthquakes. Like we have to be like, as we are working with kids and adults, helping people to form faith, we have to do it in a way that like that helps them to withstand these trials. And that's like, you know, I know we've talked about Meredith Miller before. Love. She's great. Her book Woven like talks so much about like how you build even if you don't have
kids. I think it's just such a good, so good. That's a really good point. Like we have to build our faith to withstand the inevitable, which is that it's going to shake. That's really good. I think when I hear people mention deconstructing their faith, a lot of it comes from when the church has hurt them. And church hurt is like kind of a thing right now.
It's a word.
And I am curious when we talk about like when the church has hurt people, but then it impacts their relationship with the person of Jesus, you know? And I feel like there maybe can be a separation there where it's like, yes, the church has hurt you, but Jesus heals, you know? So do you think that there are parts of church that it's okay to question and reevaluate without letting it get in the way of who the person of Jesus is? Like, how do we do that? Because so many people that I know talk about like, well, I've seen Christians do these things and I've seen the church do this thing to me and it was hurtful, but then it impacts their relationship with Jesus. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do we separate that? Because when I hear young adults talk about deconstruction, that's usually where they're coming from, is the church did something that was really crappy and now I just don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But I still want something to do with Jesus.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a tough question because like when we talk about the church, there's like different meanings, you know?
That's a good point. Like the local church. Yeah.
You've got the institution of the church or the organization of the church, like, you know, which like is a structure, you know, a framework of like how we as people gather and organize ourselves. But then you have this more like metaphysical reality of the church, which is like we are the body of Christ. We are his church as his people. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there Jesus is also, you know. And so the reality is that like people hurt people, you know, and like, and people are imperfect. And I don't know, I grew up with my mom working in the church. I spent like my afternoons in the church, like playing video games and playing hide and seek with my siblings. And, you know, so I have a lot of like warm fuzzies towards like the church. And like, I had a pretty good experience growing up in the church. And even like in my own like wrestling and doubt and my own like working in the church, like I didn't experience a lot of like hurt personally. I saw a lot of it from other people. I witnessed people experience an amount of hurt, but I didn't necessarily experience much of it personally. And I remember talking to a former pastor about this, and he told me, he's like, you need to name with some amount of specificity like what it was that hurt you in the church. Who was it? Like, because again, the church as a whole didn't hurt you. Like Joe hurt you.
Darn it, Joe.
Darn Joe.
Yeah.
And, you know, which I think was good advice, but there is also this other kind of reality where like sometimes church hurt occurs. It's kind of like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's these little things that happen over years. And it's not necessarily like this one massive blow that people take. So I think when we talk about this, it can be hard because like everybody's experience is different and we want to make sure that we honor like people's like experiences in this. Now, I think it is important to remember that like that people hurt people and Jesus heals people. It is a problem though when the people who are supposed to embody and represent the love of Jesus, like, you know, John 13, how will they know that you are my disciples? They will know you by your love. Are the perpetrators of violence, you know, whether, you know, it's like sometimes it can be physical, you know, but more often than not, it's like spiritual and
doing it in the name of Jesus.
And doing it in the name of Jesus. Exactly. That, I mean, ultimately that's like the whole concept of taking the Lord's name in vain. That's what it is when we are wielding the name of Christ and we are bringing harm to people. So how do you differentiate it? Like, how do you separate those things? I don't know. It's really hard. Like I read that question and I just drew a Venn diagram, like, because it's like you've got Jesus and you've got the church and like, we are the body of Christ. We are supposed to be his like ambassadors, his representatives in this world. And sometimes we are really bad at it. But I think
he like, redeems all things.
He redeems all things. And I think too, that like, when I think about that, I think about the incarnation. I think about the way in which Jesus has like chosen to like bring about that redemption of all things in the world. Like talk about a really inefficient method of like redemption.
Yeah.
You know, like and like why is it that like scripture presents this history of like you know, Adam and Eve being created in the garden, and then like all of this like God like working with the nation of Israel to be like a royal priesthood and all of this stuff, and like that takes like 2,000 years and it doesn't really work out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And Jesus comes as the fulfillment of that. And it's like cool. And like on the cross, he says, it is finished. And it's like, sweet. So like everything's dandy now. Nope.
Yeah.
Here we are 2,000 years later having a conversation about like how I like lost my faith and trust in God at one point in time, and how people are still doing that. So it's like his methods don't seem to like jive with the way the world operates.
You're like, so what are you doing here?
Right. There's like some amount of mystery to it, but I think like I think what's found in the midst of all of that is this invitation to like participate and to engage and to really wrestle. And so when I think about like how you like disassociate the two, I don't know if you really can.
Yeah.
But I do think people need to remember, like, or people need to, like, just look at who Jesus is.
The character?
Not Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'm learning is that you can experience, like, grief and disillusionment and disappointment, but still be deeply rooted to God. It doesn't disqualify you from being deeply rooted to Him. It actually is probably where a lot of the work is happening.
Yeah.
Like when you feel like you're in a desert, there's a lot of work happening there.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing that I had to change in my like walk with Jesus, was that like I can feel confused and have all this disillusionment and disappointment, but I'm still deeply rooted in you. It doesn't mean that you can't have that. You're not disqualified from that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think about like Jacob, the story of Jacob as he's coming back to like confront Esau, or not confront him, to basically this brother whom he has betrayed. You know, he's going back to like see him again, and he's in the wilderness, he's in the desert, and then he encounters like God there in some form or fashion, and what does that encounter look like? Well, he wrestles with him, you know, like physically. And I've always always in recent years, I've taken that as like a beautiful picture of like what faith actually is, because like, and what this whole process of like deconstruction and then ultimately, we haven't really talked about this yet, reconstruction, rebuilding, reorienting ourselves, because that's what happens to Jacob. Is he wrestles with God in the desert, and like he seems to almost get the upper hand. He gets him in like a chokehold or something, and then you know, then he touches his hip and he walks with a limp the rest of his life and all that stuff. But after all of that, like, Jacob like asks for a blessing, and God blesses him. He gives him a blessing, and then he gives him a new identity, right? And so that's like that reorientation taking place. But it happens through this like gritty process, you know, and like wrestling in the desert.
Yeah, I think let's get into the whole reconstruction part. Like, I guess I'm kind of curious, what do you think, like, because we know deconstruction is not bad. So what does it look like to do it in a healthy way? Yeah. Because you start with deconstructing, and then that leads you to a place of being ready to build back up. Yeah. In a different way.
What it should. And I think like that's where like when people speak negatively of like the deconstructive process in like our like kind of evangelical world, I think it's because they see people who kind of never leave that space of deconstruction. And like I said, you know, deconstruction, I believe it's something that happens to you. I don't think it's necessarily something we always choose. It's also like a relatively I don't want to say it's easy, but like, again, thinking about like knocking down the wall in the church the other day, the process of demolition of like taking something apart can happen relatively quickly, and it doesn't require a lot of skill. I think that's true in some capacity of like the deconstructive process. It just happens to you. It can be relatively quick. It can take more time. It can be a little more surgical at times, but more often than not, it's like pretty messy and like, I think the process of reconstruction, again, using our renovation process, it requires skill. Like we had to get Keith in here to build us a wall, because I don't know how to build a wall.
Nor do I. Yes.
I don't know how to fix drywall. Like we needed someone with wisdom and skill to come in and help us with this process of like reconstructing. Yes. Yeah. To basically create this new space for us. And so like, how do we do this well? I don't think you can do it alone. I think there's a lot of like, you know, kind of this like, it's just like you have to go at it alone, or you have to listen to your heart. You have to like, you know, just be true to yourself. And
what are you feeling?
Yeah. And I think there's some like truth to that. Like you do have to do the inner work.
It's your own faith. Yeah.
Yeah. But no matter what, you're going to listen to someone, whether you're listening to the person who says, do it alone, or you're listening to the person who's trying to offer you some guardrails to the process. You're going to have a guide in the process. And so like, I think you need to identify the people with whom you're going to do this with, who are going to like hold you accountable in this process of like deconstruction, but then also reconstruction. You know, find authors, find, you know, find a therapist, like, you know, like who can help you like walk this journey.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge. It was funny actually. So again, I mentioned this book I'm reading by Bradley Jersak. He uses like, talks about people's experiences of deconstruction as like, some people experience it as liberation. As I said earlier, it's this really freeing process, but then other people, it can be really, really traumatic. And he describes it as like a spiritual mastectomy, like what happens when you have breast cancer and you have to have this mass removed. And so his advice to like this process of like a spiritual mastectomy is like, how do you do this well? He says, well, don't do it yourself, right? You know, he says, get a second opinion, you know, talk to other people about it and hear what other people have to say. And then he says, and don't hire a plumber, you know, basically he's like, don't hire someone who's not.
Yeah.
And he describes like, he's like, basically all of the voices on like social media, those are like the plumbers of our day and age, right? Like us.
As we are on posting this on social media.
But you know, it's like those, I think those voices are like, they're important because they can be sparks of like, of truth. And, you know, it's like, I don't want to discount like what all of these people are saying, but there's just like a lot of noise on
and those people don't really know you.
They don't know you. And so I think they can be good like starting points, but they can't be like the person you walk with because they don't know you.
Yeah. So no, that's a really good point. Yeah. How do you think that we can grieve what's broken in the church without just throwing it all away? Because I think, like you mentioned, some people don't get to the reconstruction part because they kind of just throw it away.
Yeah.
Like they numb out and they're just like, I don't want to care about this. Or they freak out and make like a choice that is so unlike them, you know, or they just like completely throw away their faith.
Yeah.
So do you think there's a way to like grieve that the church isn't perfect, but also stay?
Yeah. Say I'm doing it right now.
And that is like, you would say that is kind of where the reconstruction starts, is like, you can grieve that things are not what they should be. That's just the world.
Yes.
But we can stay committed to something that isn't exactly what we thought it was.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it's like, I offer that with like a lot of like, you know, you can't stay in a place where you're being abused. You know, you can't stay in a place where like harm is occurring. But I do think that like you can find spaces where you can experience like the love of Christ while also like grieving like a loss, you know, because it is like, I think like this is a real loss for people. You know, again, it's a loss of identity. It's a loss of like reality, like what they thought was real. But I think you can do both. And I think it starts with conversation. I think you just have to talk about it with people and invite other people into the process. I think it starts there, you know, and again, use wisdom. Like, you know, don't like just talk to Annie about it, you know, like it's, you know, be vulnerable with the right people, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, like.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me that you are doing something really cool in the fall here at the Boulevard.
Yeah.
Which, tell me more about that. It's a formation circle, which is like one of our life group things we do here at the Boulevard.
It's a cool name for...
Tell me more about that, because that's what sparked having this conversation here. Yeah. Is because I think some people might want to take that step of talking to the right people about it.
Yeah. So again, this is something I think about a lot as someone who has like experienced like the process of deconstruction and like kind of I'm in the process of like reconstructing my faith. Mm-hmm. In a new, like I always say, like it's in a new and maybe more expansive way. Like that's the word I like to use. And so, like our director of spiritual formation, Danae, who couldn't be here today. We miss you, Danae. Yeah. I'm trying to channel my inner Danae and some of the things I'm sharing. Your inner
spiritual formation director.
We've had a lot of conversations about this because she's also walked through a season of kind of deconstruction and reconstruction. And we know that this is something that people like are experiencing, and that like, again, people need good guides.
Yeah.
People who are willing to like come along on the journey and not just like give someone like the answers, you know,
or
tell them like how to do this process.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the goal in this like formation circle, about like how do we reconstruct our faith after the process of deconstruction, is to provide tools and resources to people as they seek to do this. Like one of the things we keep saying is we don't want it to necessarily be like a blueprint, like A, then B, then C, like, you know, because that's like, it's just not that, and it can't be that. But we want it to be a conversation. We want it to be like, you know, there will definitely be like, I am inherently like, I am a teacher. And so it's like, yes, there's going to be some of me just talking, but it's going to be a lot of this kind of stuff where I'm just talking about like, what is deconstruction? And like, you know, I like the printing press and history and stuff.
History teacher loves the printing press.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about like the history of deconstruction and like where that's happened like throughout like, you know, the Bible and the church at large, and like why this process isn't necessarily like bad thing. It's a hard thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And then how we can like then use that information and use our experiences and use like just these resources to build back like a better faith.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
Yeah.
A closing question.
Yeah.
If someone that was listening right now said to you, I feel like I'm losing my faith, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them you're not losing your faith, you're expressing it.
So good. I love it. Tell me more.
I would say it's just the next step in the process for them. You know, Richard Rohr, again, I go to this guy a lot.
You love an author.
I love an author. He has this phrase, and it became like a bit of a motto for me as I was walking through this dark night of the soul, as we call it at times, and the Christian faith. Is you have to like trust the river. That's what he would say in this book, Everything Belongs. Trust the river, you know, and it starts by knowing that A, there is a river, and that B, like the river is going to take you places that maybe you don't want to go. You know, there are sections of the river that are going to be really smooth and like, you know, tranquil, and then you're going to hit some rapids, you're going to hit some rocks, and like it's going to be rough. But you just have to trust the river, trust the process, and continue to like allow it to take you where it wants to go. I think often like when we encounter like this feeling or this like the beginnings of this process of deconstruction, our desire can be to just like go back. We want to like pull back away from it, and I think that's where we can end up being like stalled out. And we can like have reservations about like sharing, you know, like I did, like when I was interviewing for that job, I was like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, they don't need to know this about me. But I think like it starts by like like finding those people that you can trust to like disclose your questions to and say like, hey, I'm doubting, and beginning that conversation. And it's not going to fix it, like you still may like have this experience of losing your faith. And I say that because like the reality is Christ will never leave you nor forsake you. It may feel like it, but like that's not the reality of it. At least that's been my experience of it. And I think people who have walked this journey that like, whether I've like read books that they've written or like had conversations with these people, that's been their experience as well, as that as they start to like resurface after like navigating these like tumultuous like paths of the river, they have this feeling of being deeply held, like through that whole process that Jesus was in fact with them. And so I think like, just this is a further expression of your faith, even if it feels like almost like you're losing it. And I had one other thought and it's starting to slip my mind. I think it's just about like finding those conversation partners.
Yeah.
And that's the goal of this formation circle, is to provide those conversation partners and those resources. Just being honest with yourself, like really just being honest with yourself and with others about where you are in your faith.
Yeah. Where can people find the info about your formation circle? Like when is it? When and where? Right now. It's starting in the fall, right? Yeah. September. Okay.
I think we are October, I think is actually, or no, it's the last Wednesday in September, I believe.
More information to come.
Yeah. TBD.
But we're doing it.
We are doing it for sure.
Is there any like, just off the top of your head, is there authors and people that you're like, this is a good route to go down if you want to learn more about this? Or
yeah, I mean, like I said, I love me some Richard Rohr, but like I think a really and again, I think there's lots of it depends kind of on where people are like in their faith. Like one book that I read that was incredibly helpful to me was Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God, by Brian Zond, who's a pastor in St. Joseph, Missouri. That book really helped shape and form my understanding of like who God is and why I can trust like this good and loving Father, you know? But then like again, I'll use Brian Zahn again. He's got a great book called When Everything's on Fire. That's more about like, what is this process of deconstruction? And it's a pretty easy-ish read. Okay. The book I'm reading right now, Out of the Embers by Bradley Jersak, also another book on deconstruction. A little more technical, a little more challenging at times, a little more dense, but Zahn's book is very like pastoral and warm, and a little bit of an easier read.
But there's books on this because it happens to people.
Yeah. There's a lot of books on it, and it's not just because like it is in vogue right now. It is like part of like our cultural milieu, but it's like it's happened, and I think we're experiencing like a pretty strong pendulum swing in our cultural moment from like, history, right? The 1950s, 40s, 50s, when like you had like this, like everyone in America like was a Christian, that was like the idyllic like way of being in like the United States, and we've swung away from that, over the past like 50, 60 years. And now I feel like, that's why we're experiencing things like the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's go back to this era, this idyllic era when everybody was a Christian. And, what people don't always acknowledge, and that when everything was white, and so I think that like we're just experiencing this like pendulum swing in all of it. So
thanks for sharing.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll let people know more about your formation circle.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, because it's happening.
I've got notes.
Yes.
Don't you worry.
He's reading books.
Outline. I'm reading books.
Yeah.
I'm not a detail person.
We'll figure those out later.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week on the Pace Podcast.